Coming to you from UBN Studios in Burbank, California. You're listening to the Unsugarcoated podcast with your host, Aalia and Patrick.
Yay! How is everybody? Welcome back to season 5 of Unsugarcoated with Aalia. Can you believe it? Can you feel what is in the air, ladies and gentlemen? Because I do. I feel it is an amazing new season coming up, and I can't wait to get it started. Well, first off, I actually want to say we're so thankful for a lot of things. In the off season, we have continued to get response from an amazing growing audience. We so appreciate you, the messages, rating going on there, and just letting the world know your experience. Thank you so much. It means so much to me. We also were recently nominated for the 2020 Shorty Social Good Award for Best Use of Podcast. I'm really honored to be, amongst Sanjay Gupta and other amazing podcasts. It's an honor because really at the end of the day, what we are here to do is create socially conscious media. And Unsugarcoated Media, the organization that, we run all of this through, it is a non-profit media company. And, we're only really getting started. So thank you so much. And for today, we actually have our first ever sponsorship. Thank you so much. Coming out of El Paso, today's episode is brought to you by House of Kings Card Club. They are a social club bringing Texas Hold'em back to Texas. Their main purpose is to give El Paso a legal and safe poker room that strives to uphold the integrity of the game and provides the best customer service to its members. For more information on our wonderful sponsors, please go to House of Kings Card Club EP.com. And we're really honored. They actually look to help a lot of nonprofits like ourselves, so it's really cool that they've helped us. With that, we'll get into more. So most of you, or many of you, know a lot of my story is kind of crazy and tragic, but also beautiful. And I love sharing all parts of it. And as your host, I'm here to actually serve you. And with the knowledge and understanding I've acquired, I'm really honored to know other individuals who have also gone through the same, and they're doing incredible things. And I want to amplify those voices and highlight those stories and share it so that we can continue to create more empathy and understanding of one another. Today, this conversation is going to be about women, violence against women, young girls, fathers, and probably some sensitive information, but I think that it's important our audience hears it. And I don't talk much about my relationship with my own biological father, but it's definitely a complicated one. And I can just tell you this. At 14 years old, when I really needed my parents to have the emotional intelligence to support me, they didn't. Now, I don't hate them and I don't blame them, but what I look to do in our generation, like I'm 45, so I want to help other moms and dads like myself be those emotionally intelligent parents. And that doesn't mean that I always do everything right. I often say I'm not a perfect mother, but I am at all times the type of mother I wish I had. But fathers are so important. So recently I had had the privilege of meeting a gentleman who's very involved. He's a father. He's got an incredible dedication to the community. And I'm really looking forward to sharing him with you. So let's get going on that. In 2010, while working with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Patrick Erlandson first learned of human trafficking in organs from field agents working in Africa. In 2012, he began the Prevention Subcommittee of the Long Beach Human Trafficking Task Force, a speaker, activist, and organizer of community events such as Youth Exploitation Safety Symposiums, See It, End It Film and Arts Festival, and FatherCon. Patrick, a husband and father of 2 grown daughters, he approaches the prevention of human trafficking and violence against children in 2 areas of vulnerability: the family through fathers and men, and currently the co-host of Twitch's podcast, See It, End It, addressing issues that lead to being exploited and entitlement that leads to exploitation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Patrick Erlandson.
It is such a pleasure to be here and to see you again after all these months of lockdown.
Yes, because you work with Artists for Change a lot. A previous guest of ours, beautiful Julia Verdon, also very passionate. She is actually what led to me hearing your story and hearing your passion and hearing the conviction in what you're doing. So for my audience who doesn't, outside of my bio, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what's brought you to this area of work?
Yeah. Um, like many people who are now working with human trafficking, it started with an international exposure. And for me, it was when I was working with UNHCR, with the UN Refugee Agency, headquartered here. I didn't work abroad with them, but in Los Angeles to raise awareness and get support for this growing number, this over 40 million refugees now worldwide. So I was working here, but we were getting field reports from Africa. And one just kind of just was a semi truck to my heart. It just kind of slammed into me with this, something that I just couldn't turn away from. And that was children escaping from South Sudan, from Darfur, and from the fighting that was happening there. Many of them had seen their own parents killed or were being sent away by their parents to try to reach a safe place. And they tried to cross Egypt to get to Israel. At that time, it was Israel would give jobs to people that are coming from Africa. So they would be fleeing this violence, come into Egypt, and there was a group of Bedouins that would meet them, take them in, feed them, give them comfort. All the while they were calling for a doctor from Cairo who would then come down and drug them and cut out their organs and bury them in the desert. And that to me was just, it was such a gross violation of a child already having experienced the worst, and then to be betrayed in that way. It just kind of stuck in my heart, and I couldn't let it go. And so I started researching everything about human trafficking, from organ sales to labor trafficking to sex trafficking, and discovering just how prevalent it is here. It's like in our schools, it's in our communities, it's happening, in plain sight and also under cover of darkness. And it was just, this became an issue that I just couldn't kind of walk away from. And so I started to get more and more engaged, more involved, working with the Long Beach Human Trafficking Task Force, and especially taking on prevention. Because for me, it's like we need to do the rescue work. We need to get people out of that life. We need to give them a chance to have a new life. But to end it, we have to go upstream, and we have to start looking at those causes.
Right.
And so that's where my passion came in.
Interestingly enough, and I just have to bring this up because you talk about in plain sight. Recently, we had the Wayfair issue happen.
Right.
And this is what struck me about, for people who don't know, there was posting or, items for sale, like a throw pillow. And I saw this with my own eyes. This is not something I heard from a friend. I went and I looked. I was like, why is there multiple pillows that you would buy in a store for $5? Why are they being sold for $10,000? Same thing. Or these cabinets. And they, it was very interesting because it did coincide with the namings of these items, and then missing girls that had the similar, very exotic names, by the way, not like Kathy or Susan. It was very unique names. And I was really floored by the amount of people who just dismissed it. Whether it was true or not, I felt, speaking to the way that people that this is just a conspiracy theory. And Patrick, when I saw those things, I had to keep reminding people, do you realize every time we just dismiss it, we leave a child or a girl or a victim, because there are also boys that are trafficked, that are praying for someone to find them, praying that somebody doesn't give up on them. And when you so easily dismiss that it is happening in plain sight, that these things do exist in our world, I can't help but feel my heart break a little bit, because I know you work in prevention, but you also happen to work with some organizations or are familiar with organizations that go in and rescue these girls, right? And children and people, or people who are being trafficked.
Yeah, and that's absolutely essential. And I fully support the organizations and people that are doing that type of work. It's just where my focus is really getting upstream to where we don't have vulnerable kids that
exactly.
so easily trafficked.
So true. So let's talk about that, because you've done a couple things. And by the way, I loved when you did FatherCon. I actually did my event called EmpowerCon, and I was almost a little bit like, everyone's doing a con. Well, I want to do this. And so when I saw your FatherCon, I'm like, I love it. I get it. I totally get it. Talk to me about that and where that comes into play in your prevention efforts.
Well, in talking with a lot of survivors and in, looking at what's happening with especially men today, you realize, just like you said, your parents weren't emotionally engaged. They weren't emotionally there for you. They weren't present for you, especially a father, which we all need. I think for a long time, we've kind of dismissed the importance and significance of fathers, and thinking that the mother's the most important person in shaping the children. and the father's kind of more incidental. And in the worst case, the father's just seen as the ATM machine for the family.
Right.
But in the last 20, 25 years, there's been an increasing number of studies and really looking at the significance and what that balance brings when you have a healthy male figure in your life who's in a father position. It can be a father, it can be a stepfather, it can be an uncle. But when you have that healthy male figure in your life, different parts of you develop and grow, and they don't necessarily develop the same way when that's missing. And so for me, this is very alarming because we're raising children who are missing something, and someone that's got a hole or a gap in their life is going to be much more vulnerable to somebody coming up and offering it to them. Right. And which is exactly what traffickers and predators do. They know the vulnerability of children who don't have a good relationship with their father or have no father in their life, and then they come in and basically steal that position and right. become this father figure to them in a very abusive and destructive way. But for so many young people, they accept it because this is something that they want. And I think the hardest thing you're fighting against is that young person, that child creates a fantasy that this person is now fulfilling this need that I have. This person is fulfilling, the part of me that's been unloved.
Right.
And so they accept the abuse. They'll tolerate it and even accept it and even alter their own identity of who they are as someone who becomes enslaved because they've invested in that fantasy.
Right.
And I think when you look at like what a father brings, one of the things that really stood out to me was a mother's love tends to be, of course, we're talking in generalities here. So we don't need a lot of feminists saying that I'm way off base here. But I've
got you. Look, I'm with you. Don't worry.
But a mother brings this kind of more of an embracing, accepting environment. She's the one who's feeding the child in most cases. She's taking care of the daily things. So there's a degree of comfort and security that comes from a mother that's absolutely essential, and it's really the soil that a child grows in. What a father brings, and this has been through studies that have been done, a father tells you that you're worth being loved. Right? So you've got this nurturing, loving environment with the mother, but what the father brings is you are worth my time. You're worth my love.
Right.
And that is life-changing for a young person.
That is so true. It's interesting that you say that because I think even for daddy's girl, right? There's always the daddy's girl, and especially two girls, that relationship seems to just always hold something unique, and it's a different, my daughter I have 4 kids total ranging from 23 to 3.5, but my 3.5 with my husband, she told me the other night, she's like, Daddy's my best friend. She said, you're almost my best friend. She said, Daddy's just a little bit more. And I mean, I kid you not, it doesn't matter what I do for this child. When she gets in the car and I pick her up from school, is Daddy home? I mean, I value that. I honor that. I think that's true. I have a couple of statistics to back up exactly what you're saying, which for our audience, I really want them, to understand, hone in on some of the numbers. Just in some basic research I did, 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. That is according to the U.S. Department of Health census. 90% of all homeless and runaway children are from fatherless homes, which is 32 times the average. 85% of all children who show behavior disorders come from fatherless homes. 80% of rapists with anger problems come from fatherless homes. 71% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. And those are some pretty staggering statistics when you're saying the dads matter. Absolutely they do, because you wouldn't have numbers like that if it wasn't the case. You agree?
Right. Oh, absolutely. And there's other data too, like the rates of incarceration, dropout from high school, drug abuse. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, you find very few figures that say that not having a father in your life is a good thing.
Very true.
It's resoundingly the opposite. And we've kind of just let that slide for a long time. Yeah. And so I think we need to, and this is really my hope in my work. And I mean, it's really like we really need to invigorate fatherhood.
Yes.
And with an awareness that you are going to shape this human being in a way that's irreplaceable, and as a father or as a father figure. And I think if we can, instead of it being this like, don't do this, don't be a bad father, don't hurt your kids, if we can get the message through that this is actually where your greater joy is going to come from.
Right.
Your greatest joy is not going to come from, self-indulgence and just doing all the things that you like to do, but is actually investing in a human being who's going to grow into someone who will love you with their whole heart, soul.
Okay.
And I have friends like who talk about their daughter wants to marry someone like their dad. I mean, it sounds a little creepy, but it's really true, and that they see this
Right.
modeling of love between, a mother and a father, husband and wife, and they feel such a powerful love from their parent that's what they want for themselves. And I think that's really such a healthy thing. It's a healthy system that we've let kind of fall apart.
I think that it's such a healthy thing. That is so true. When you're doing the fathercon, and you're talking to these fathers, and I think there's two things that come to mind when we talk about this. One, we talk about fathers who have challenges. Maybe the baby's mama doesn't want to be cooperative. Maybe there's custody issues. I feel like I want to tell men out there who are fathers, that doesn't give you an excuse to just give up. And then a lot of times when people hear the word fatherless, they presume that means that they're always absent from the house. Now, you talked about men. I remember when I met you, that was one of the things you talked about, not just the men. There's a lot of men out there who think, I'm working hard, I'm working 10 hours a day, I'm providing, hey, I'm taking phone calls. What goes under the radar when those things happen? Fatherless is not always necessarily physical, right? Like It can be emotionally absent, and like you're there physically, but you're not really there.
Yeah, the term disengaged, where you have a disengaged father is one who's actually living in the home and living with the children, but he's totally not a part of their life. It's just like these things that have really bothered me. I was watching the series The Americans, which there was a case where this one Russian agent gets killed, and he's dying in the van, and his comrades are there with him, and they're holding him, and he goes, his last dying breath, he's going, get word to my mother, tell her that I always loved her, and tell my father to rot in hell. And it's like so many shows and movies. It's like, why do we have so many kids coming out of their homes with this hatred for their father, and it's just far too pervasive, and this is coming, from fathers who are present,
right,
but are disengaged. They're emotionally depriving a child.
Yeah.
And that has really dire consequences, because that messaging then is, you are not worthy of my time. You're not worthy. You're not lovable.
Right. And that ultimately, I mean, no matter who you are, even the father is a person. We know we always chase what makes us feel good, right? We chase to be seen. We chase to be heard. We chase to be valued. Not everyone gets it. And so most people are chasing the wrong ways. And that's really where I feel, that this violence against these young girls, young women, and as you said, once you set the precedent for abuse, then you grow up having a low self-esteem. You grow up thinking that that's okay, or that you accept it because, like you said, I'm not worthy of more. This is what I have to settle for. Right. And I mean, when we look at the struggling youth, and we look at, with COVID right now too, by the way, COVID has definitely, I know you're probably like me too. You have a lot of events and things that we're moving along to bring all this awareness. How has COVID impacted that, and how have you been able to continue rallying the support and prevention methods for the community?
That's an excellent question. It threw everyone for a loop. And I think a lot of us, when we first entered into this kind of a lockdown kind of period, a lot of us were hoping that would kind of actually, diminish human trafficking, diminish the exploitation that's going on. And the exact opposite happened. It's all exacerbated. It's all increased.
Right.
We have more people now that are being exploited. And my biggest concern is that right now our children are being groomed to be exploited in the months to come. Because they're all online, and we have by far now the most grooming is happening through the internet. It's happening through social media.
So talk about that, because I like the audience. I know what grooming is, and I've
Yeah.
dealt with it, and I've seen it. And for the audience, like if I'm a parent, what should be some of the things I'm looking for when you refer to grooming?
Changes in behavior of a child, more secretiveness, more like distancing from friends, distancing from family. I mean, a lot of that just is kind of natural teenage kind of behavior. But if you start to notice differences and they're spending more and more time online, they're more secretive about what they're doing online, like really not wanting you to see who they're talking to and what's happening. Those are all just kind of red flags. Because what's happening now, there's between 700 to 950,000 predators that are online at any time of the night or day. I mean, these are people that are just trolling for any child who will talk to them,
Right.
so that they can start to build a relationship. So the grooming process is building a relationship of trust where the child is going to trust this person more than their own parents.
Right.
And if you let that sink in, you are meeting someone online that you have never met face to face, and your trust is being pulled by that person, and is being then given to that person without ever really knowing them, over your own parents, over the people that you know that have loved and nurtured you and taken care of you throughout your life. And that's what's happening. We have people that are meeting. A friend of mine who works in the Midwest said it's now 8 days. All it takes is 8 days of a relationship with someone online, and that child is taking off their clothes and sending naked pictures of themselves to this stranger. And which is one of the first steps in this grooming process, or it can be. Where a child now puts themselves in a position where they've exposed themselves physically, they're exposing themselves in a sexual way to a stranger that then can be used against them. And there's been numerous cases where then that trafficker says, look, I'm going to post these pictures, I'm going to send them to your church, I'm going to send them to all of your friends, I know who everyone is, if you don't do more for me.
Right.
And I think this is also one thing for parents to be aware of. This is happening to boys through games. There was one young guy, he's a 15, 16-year-old, I forget the exact age, but 15, 16, he was a total heterosexual young guy playing, combat games online. He wanted to buy extra stuff for his avatar. He didn't have the money. He asked his team leader if he could borrow the money. Team leader says yes, lets him borrow the money, buys his stuff. 2 weeks later, the team leader comes back and says, man, I need you to pay me back. Kid doesn't have an income. He can't ask his parents, but he's already used the money. So the guy says, well, it's okay. I know you can't pay me now. So just, take your shirt off, take a picture of me with your shirt off and just send it over. And then, that'll help reduce some of the debt, and then the next thing is your pants. And then the next thing is more and more. And it increases to the point where this guy was going to set up dates with gay men for this straight teenager who felt that he had to own it because he borrowed the money.
Right.
And he reached a point where he was going to commit suicide. And he ended up actually telling his parents and exposed this thing. He was lucky, but we do have far too many teenagers committing suicide that are put in these kind of positions. Or they end up going and meeting people and having their life go down a path that is very hard to come back from.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Well, look, really quick, we have to give a one little minute mid-roll read in the midst of this intense conversation, but we are going to do it. We are so appreciative of our sponsors. We want to once again thank them. House of Kings Card Club in El Paso, Texas. Please text KINGS to 915-603-3000 to register to receive promos and event notifications. And thank them for helping us out, by the way. Okay, so quickly, let's talk about some of the solutions. So when we talk about parents being emotionally intelligent, I think one of the things, just as you were sharing the story about the boy, I feel that creating a safe space for our teenagers and our youth is important. Saying things like, I actually tell my kids, if someone ever was to threaten you, you need to know I have your back, right? Like I feel like if you let, because that's what these predators and these people take advantage of, the sense that they want to make you feel afraid of your parents or your community. And if you instill in them that you have their back and that, you wouldn't turn your back on them. I tell my kids, I might not like what you do, but I always have your back. I mean, to me, that feels like one of the things we could do. What are some of the other things you feel parents can do?
Well, I think people, diminish the significance of that. Being a trusted adult in the lives of a child, someone that they can really trust, that you're not going to just jump down their throat. Your response to them doing something stupid is not, I'm going to take away your phone and lock you in the closet for 10 years. Which is the emotional parental response to a lot of our children's behavior. Really kind of a normal.
I'm laughing a little bit. I'm a 15 and a 13-year-old. Yes.
Yeah, I know. I've been there. But instead, if we really see the value, having someone that a child can trust is absolutely essential to prevention. I mean, this is really my core message is really, we have got to become people of integrity. So you can't be saying one thing and doing another in front of your children, and you have to realize that what you model is what they're taking in as truth.
Yeah.
And so it's really important that we get this message through, like before people become parents would be really good. And then, as new parents, but as and this is the thing that I did with FatherCon. So FatherCon was really for fathers who have messed up, future fathers, and father figures. So we really wanted to target this collective of future fathers and people who are now in a father position. But because one of the problems that's preventing a lot of the dads from being there for their kids is they feel ashamed. If you have a father who's been watching porn, if you have a father who's maybe engaged in going to prostitutes or, doing things that he is certainly not proud of and certainly not doing openly, that's going to really damage his ability to be trustworthy to his kids. And so we have to do some real healing work there. And so getting away from the shaming and blaming of fathers, you messed up, we have to get beyond that to a point where all of us are vulnerable to temptation. At different times in our life, we are all vulnerable. And evil has a way of finding when we're most vulnerable and hitting us, where we're weakest. And I kind of compare this to the shooter at the MGM in Las Vegas, where you take an ordinary gun, you put a bump stock on it, and then you're up in a crowd of people, and you're just shooting, just pelting bullets down into a crowd of people. And if you're vulnerable, if you're in that spot that's right in front of where a bullet is going to hit, you're going to get hit. And I think this is what's happening now. We have pornography, hardcore pornography, pumped into the internet, into any vessel that will receive it 24/7.
Right.
For free.
For free.
And so you are up against this massive assault on our integrity as human beings, not just as men. I mean, now it's about 30% women that are being drawn into the kind of the world of pornography. But for men especially, there are moments of weakness. You get drawn in. It damages your integrity, and it causes for many people to withdraw. Right. Many men just kind of withdraw. And the message that you hear over and over in your head is, your kids would be better off without you. You are such a screw up. You're too bad.
Right.
And it was interesting. In the last FatherCon, I had Rodney King's daughter. I got to know her through her scholarship program to keep African American fathers engaged with their families, and I was so inspired by that. So we kind of became friends, and I asked her to come to FatherCon, and she wasn't scheduled to speak, but I asked her to get up and say a few things. And the reason was, Rodney King. Most of us know about him as drug abuse, cops beating him up, riots, buildings burning. This is when you think Rodney King, those are the images most people have. What she said, he was an incredible father. He invested not just in her, he was there for every sports event. He was there for everything that she went through in school and her friends. So he was always there, very attentive, very engaged father with a drug problem and serious demons in his own life. But I think the message there was really like, don't listen to the temptation that your kids are going to be better off without you. Mm-hmm. Laura King is an amazing person who has incredible compassion for her community and for others that she got from her dad, who was a drug addict.
Right.
And so I think I'm really concerned when there's like too much like demonizing fathers, demonizing men, and shaming to the point that it becomes very unproductive.
Right.
What we really need is to create an environment where, we've all messed up.
Right.
We've all gotten off track, And the quicker we get back on track, the quicker our kids are going to be healthy and protected. And so let's do that. And I think, I don't know in your case, but when I've talked to people who have gone through abuse from a parent, whether it was incestuous or, emotional abuse, other forms of physical abuse, kids are really quick to forgive if they see a change. And, and I think if it's a case of physical abuse or sexual abuse, there are cases where I would highly recommend getting that dad out of the home, get away from the kids and getting away from anyone that they're doing physical or serious emotional harm to. But in many, many cases, it's this guilt that's driving men out of the home, and we're seeing the consequences of it. Kids are not better off without a dad.
Yeah. And, I think also sometimes there are parents, especially if we're divorced. My parents divorced before I knew that they were married. I don't even think I was just talking about this a moment ago, and I wasn't really around my father too much. The memories they're mixed, but he wasn't really present. And then when I got to be a teenager, I was with him, and then that was very toxic, and it was never any molestation. There was physical abuse at one point. He did beat my butt for ringing up because remember back in the day we didn't have unlimited calling, and I rang up a phone bill and he beat the crap out of me with the phone. So yeah, that wasn't that fun. But more than that, he actually abandoned my brother and I on the streets of San Diego when we were staying with him because he didn't want to deal with us. And I've been on my own since I was 14, largely because of those type of things. And the reason why I had a distant relationship growing up was because for me it just became more apparent I needed to not have I couldn't have certain toxicity in my life. I forgave him, but there was not toxicity. But to switch to something that I think and so anyways, I say he just kind of stayed away, right? Like if I didn't want to be in his life, he wasn't going to be in mine or vice versa. There wasn't much of an attempt to massage it, to make it better. That was productive. So in that case, I consider my situation not unique. I know other people have it, but I still hold out hope for other fathers and daughters, stepfathers, by the way, too. We never want to not, like you said, a mentor. Parents are mentors, and children will grow up not to do what you said. They will grow up to do what you did and how you lived. And we have some really bad cycles we want to try and break, right? One of them that I feel is that there are a lot of men who also feel that there are not certain conversations that they can have with their daughters. In fact, the other day I was talking to my ex-husband about my 13-year-old daughter, and he mentioned in just passing conversation, well, my mom is around here and she'll talk to her about things that I can't talk to her about. And while I understood that, because we come from like this conservative cultural kind of, yes, men don't talk to their daughters about certain things. How do you feel about that? Because I would rather him be more comfortable and feel like there isn't something I can't. There's always a way to talk about it. But,
Right.
do you know what I mean? Do you agree with me or disagree? How do you feel about do you know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely, I do. And you're spot on. I think anything that a parent is not willing to talk to their kids about, the kids are going to assume that there's something wrong with it. Right? I mean, your kids apply meaning to whatever they're being exposed to and whatever they're experiencing. So they're going to come to the wrong conclusion, and they're going to assume that there's something wrong with sex if dad won't talk about it. There's something hidden, dirty about it, or something that shouldn't be discussed, and then that drives them to other areas of education.
Right.
Because now the number one educator on sex is pornography for our young people.
Yeah.
From the ages of 8 or 9. That's the initial ages of exposure now to, and we're not talking about some breasts in Playboy magazine. This is like,
right.
Gang rape, the things that are now present on, in internet porn, is what kids are being exposed to. So we need those conversations a lot earlier than ever before.
Oh, yeah.
In an age-appropriate way, but yeah.
I mean, even TikTok has stuff that, I can't lie, and I don't know how other people feel. And I am a parent who had, as a part of the divorce, my ex-husband, I didn't agree with, and I'm not trying to make him bad. I mean, he wanted to have a way for the kids to contact him directly without having to go through mom. And so at a certain age, younger than I would have preferred, they did get a cell phone. And, the access, it's a Pandora's box in their hands. And I heard recently, I was talking to one of my interns we were talking about how on TikTok now they have videos that are in an effort to destigmatize mental health, they have videos where some kids kind of post videos about how cool it is to be in the mental health facility and in recovery centers. So my daughter came to me kind of saying, well, maybe I want to, I'm a little depressed, which is natural COVID. She's a teenager. Maybe I need to go into a mental facility. And I said, who's creating the fantasy for you that that's an easy journey that this is the place that you need to be, But, my intern, she was kind of reaffirmed with me. She says, no, that's the influence that she's getting if she has TikTok. I'm like, wait, I thought this was just something we were supposed to dance cute on. It's not. And for a parent to feel like we can control it all is a very overwhelming feeling. I mean, I'm sure you understand having two daughters yourself.
You can't. And I think that's one of the things that's, again, getting back to that point of being a trustworthy, a person that your children will actually come and talk to is essential, because you can't control it all. And I think now we have a growing sense of people who are working within human trafficking and looking at children who are being exploited at younger ages. If they have a cell phone, you've got to have the talk with them about predators, about people's motivation, about what love is, about kind of the mutuality of love. Because a lot of young people, they don't get it. And especially if they're getting exposed to pornography, porn is 100% self-indulgent and it's self-pleasure at the expense of another person. And you don't have to have any feelings for that object. You don't have to have any concern for them. They are there 100% to please you. And for kids to be growing up, but that's the example of sex, that's the example of relationship.
Yeah,
I mean,
we're
doomed.
Yeah, no, I can't.
And I think, I don't know if you've run across this, but the data, and I think it was in the UK, there was a 400% increase of child-on-child sexual assault. So have an 11 or 12-year-old sexually assaulting his 6-year-old sister or a classmate because they're watching porn and they want to go try it out.
Right.
And so their behavior is now being changed by what they're being exposed to.
So
and TikTok is one.
Go ahead. Sorry.
TikTok is another one where it's normalizing certain behavior.
Right.
And you get likes, you get rewarded for behaving in ways that you wouldn't ordinarily do, where your inhibitions would control you. There would be other constraints, but TikTok and other sites they create a platform that allows you then to violate your own sense of what's right and wrong in a harmless, safe space of the online world.
Right. And it's not so harmless.
It's not.
It's not. Have you seen Social Dilemma? Of course, you sound like somebody who's seen Social Dilemma, but I knew it. Yeah. I read a book in 1999, like The Age of Spiritual Machines. I've always noticed that double-edged sword, the benefits, the blessings of everything that comes with it, and the curse. It's just it's the yin and the yang. You can't have the good without the bad, but it's very difficult. So kind of segueing into something that we had talked about as well. I think for me, one of the strong things that I've heard you say that really was profound is that you called out on. So we know we've got some, it's definitely transcended the normal, not trying to say normal or, normalized porn, but okay, porn, and then if young kids think that's the standard of it, it's a very alarming thing. But what you've pointed out is that we need to address the men, like human trafficking, all these things are horrible, but there's the law of supply and demand that goes into business that I learned a long time ago. If you don't have a need for it, you don't need to supply it. Why, do we have such a need for human trafficking? And you went to the core of that. Why do we have men, and I'll let I have your quote. Why do we have men paying to have sex with an 11-year-old autistic girl? That's the guy we need to sit down with, right? And say, well, what is happening and what has brought you this place? In your experience, can you talk more about your experience with that, your thoughts on that, and how you're using things like fathercon and see it ended to address those with men?
Yeah, absolutely. That point that I was making too about we have our sons are coming out of our homes and paying for sex with 11-year-old or 12-year-old autistic children. I mean, it's because you now have traffickers preying on, children with disabilities because they're malleable. They don't say no. They're easy
eager to please.
Eager to please, and just boggles my mind that there would be men lining up to pay for sex with a child like that. And anyway, there's a lot more to that, but I think definitely the demand is being just totally driven now by pornography, and there's more and more recognition of this, especially if you get to younger and younger boys. What that does is creates a normalcy to entitlement, and these are the two things that I'm always trying to address: entitlement and vulnerability, because the vulnerability is what's making someone accept being exploited. They'll end up even embracing being exploited in cases where they feel that this is what they deserve. I mean, similar to a child who's self-harming, they're cutting because they feel that somehow they deserve this, or this becomes their normal expression for themselves, which is tragic. But on the other hand, too, we're creating a sense of entitlement, and this is really worrisome, because if you buy this idea that I'm entitled to my pleasure, then it's like you're taking steps, little by little, you're taking increasing steps into an area where you are then willing to cause harm, to even intentionally cause harm to another human being, because you feel this is what you deserve. And all of our advertising messaging, I mean, so much of it is, you deserve this, you deserve to feel good, you deserve to have all the things that you want, you deserve it, you're entitled to it, it all should be yours. And I agree that we are entitled to the things that we've worked for, that we have been given, but we're not entitled to taking someone else's life, their dignity, their sense of self-worth. And that's what we're normalizing now in the media, in films, and in songs. I mean, just horrible. Some of the songs that kids are growing up listening to, that glamorize this type of behavior. It glamorizes being prostituted. It glamorizes being abused and accepting the abuse. So this is what's driving the demand. You have boys that are feeling increasingly entitled to other people's lives and bodies for their own gratification. And so this is, I mean, human trafficking is the second most lucrative industry in the world, and it's the fastest growing international crime. And the reason is because the demand keeps growing.
Right.
And it's growing because we're feeding the fantasy of men that is not going to be met by a wife or a girlfriend.
Right.
You're feeding a fantasy that they're going to have to experience with someone else. So
Right.
many girls on the streets, I mean, they're saying, men are getting into the car with them and looking at porn and going, I want to do this to you.
It's there's this dichotomy I see, or I don't know if that's the right word, but when you talk about women, we have a lot of women who are standing up for women in the sex industry. There's this method or this empowerment, aspect where women want to say, especially ones that say, I am doing this of my own volition, right? Like, I mean, like you said, we talk general here, and we're not here to defend or speak. Everything's multifaceted, more multi-layered.
Exactly.
And I recognize a lot of women are out there saying, this is my choice, and I'm not gonna be put down by a man, and I'm with all of that. But when we talk about human trafficking, I think it's so important to make the distinction between slavery. It is modern day slavery. Versus a woman who, is doing it because she chooses. Because there are some. I mean, I've had conversations with women. I happen to know, but at the same token, I do think when we talk about socially conscious media, what are we creating? Because we have acquired this mentality of, if we think it, we can create it. But what is the ramifications to society, right? And
Right.
how is that contributing to this? So while I'm all about a woman feeling empowered and feeling like she's not going to be, she's going to, the song that just came out with Cardi B and WAP and Meg, it was interesting though, because you had so many people applauding it in the sense of, oh, they're grabbing their womanhood and they're not letting men tear them down, and I get that 1,000%. But I'm also very cautious, and I'm honest to tell people, and I will say I represent this as a role model. Anyone who sees me, look, I believe a woman and a girl can be classy and sexy. I think that we do, while I'm never blaming a woman for what happens to her because of how she's dressed, at the same token, I want our women to understand that you are beautiful and that you don't have to feel that way in order to gain attention. I mean, I have, of my 4 kids, 3 are daughters, and I want them all to be proud of who they are, stand strong, and never feel intimidated by a man in that way. And so It's such an interesting conversation. I really applaud you for all that you're doing in our communities to make it, safer for young people, and just let people know they can't turn away from this. It's like,
Right.
oh, let me turn the channel to something more fun. Well, you know what? Life is not always fun. Life's not always fair. But I think that there's a lot of people who hold judgment, right? I remember seeing a documentary about a woman I had worked with who had actually been kidnapped and sold into human trafficking. And she ended up doing a documentary. And at the beginning, it was, personal testimonies from women who had been trafficked, not because they wanted to, because they were kidnapped, same thing. And they couldn't even look in someone's eyes to ask them for help because people looked down on them. We see a homeless person on the street. We don't catch their eyes. And a lot of people don't like to. We feel it makes us feel uncomfortable. You see a girl on the street, you don't take the time to say, "Are you okay? Do you want to be here? Is there anything I can do?" It. And
Well,
I
that's
mean,
a message. I don't know if you've heard of Ori Freeman, but Ori Freeman, that was her. She was trafficked at the age of 11 outside of Disneyland, and her message was, nobody saw me, and if they did see me, they saw me as trash. They saw me as this bad kid.
Right.
But most people just walked on by, and you feel invisible. And I think that's something that really has to change. We have to see each other. We have to recognize that people are in vulnerable places, and acknowledge them. Be willing to kind of step into that world a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's, a lot of what I've really tried to do is create a sense that there's something for all of us to do. Wherever you are at in life, there's something you can be doing to making things better. And it's as little as you notice a kid's having a hard time, you be there for them, offer to help, at least acknowledge that they exist as a human being. And I think this is, again, one of the things with See It, End It, with the film and art festival that's coming up in November, is we really want to raise the awareness through film, through music, through dance, like really through the arts, get people to feel, I've got some part to play in this. I can actually make a difference.
Right.
We shouldn't have over 40 million people enslaved today in the 21st century. It just should not be happening. And it's going to take all of us to get aware and then to get motivated to act. And that's the whole point of these kind of campaigns, to really raise awareness, is drive people to a point. Yeah, that's something I can do. I can support that, or I can say hello to this kid that I know is hurting. So
yeah, because prevention, you're in such a key area, because I didn't know this. You probably do know her. Oh my gosh, her last name is Maria, or her name is Maria. She works with an organization. She was telling me that in the United States, and this is, yes, fathers, we love you. We don't want your kids to end up. So fathers, the message is, pay attention, be more involved. It's okay. We know you're struggling, but we want to encourage you to keep trying, never give up, because we don't want our kids to go into these situations. And I lost the train of thought that I had there for a second, so forgive me. But, Maria, she was telling me that in the United States, there's a lot more red tape. So once you are actually trafficked and kidnapped, it's so much harder for the U.S. government. They have tips, and they said that they go into countries like Thailand, the Philippines, and they're able, with easier access, to extract these victims and save them. Whereas in the United States, there's a lot more bureaucratic. There's red tape. They have to build the case, and I was just like, wow, okay. So it makes me think that prevention, like anything, I'm a cancer survivor as well, prevention is always key. So I really appreciate your time. Please tell our audience where they can actually go to support you. You mentioned your upcoming film festival.
Yeah, please check it. It's See It, End It, SEEITENDIT.com. We're going to have more and more information coming. We're building a new platform that's going to become a global platform for working together with artists, corporations, individuals, NGOs. It's really going to be a place for the whole human trafficking effort to come together, and to bring artists, bring everybody on board. It's a really exciting project, and that's going to be launched later this month. And then November 17th to November 22nd, it will be a 6-day event with incredible content. We've got, just amazing films, short films, feature films, documentaries, whatever it is, it's going to open your heart. And then we're going to hand you ways that you can help, things that you can do to really make a difference in this.
That's amazing. And very, people, it's funny that you you should get excited to help others, and I think that that's important. So
Yeah.
I really look forward to supporting your efforts. Thank you for being on the show with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to see you again, and so grateful to be here.
And we'll see you again soon for sure. Well, everybody, I want to thank you for staying with us. We'll be with you next week for another episode. But in the meantime, thank you so much for letting us be unsugarcoated. Take care. Bye-bye.
It's so strange, I'm not holding my tongue. Radio making me feel so numb. Stolen beats, they're on repeat. But come on, don't we all wanna be someone? Yeah, it's killing me, but I just wanna be a man.
What are you still doing here? Come back next week.